fair to say that of all the Japanese marques, Mazda has had the worst rap of all over the years. You know, it's never quite had the cachet of Toyota and its penchants for reliability. Neither has it had the same kind of esteem as Honda either, which is renowned for longevity in most cases. And unlike Honda and Toyota, its luxury marque, which was called a Marti, failed to get off the ground in the early 90s. They abandoned it completely. I think a lot of it is probably the association with Ford. You know, that association began in 1974 when Ford bought like 7% of the company. It increased its ownership to 25% in 1979, and by 1993 it owned a third of it. There were numerous models around the world that were basically combined Mazda and Ford offerings. In Australia, for instance, it had the Ford Laser over several generations, which was basically a rebadged Mazda 323. It also had the Telstar there as well, a rebadged Mazda 626. The later Laser was sold in the US as an Escort, for instance. And here in the US, notoriously, it had the Probe, which was a reworked Mazda 626. There was a version of the Mazda version of the Explorer called the Navajo as well. And there was all sorts of like crossbreeding. The Ranger pickup truck was sold as a Mazda as well. In fact, one version of it was a Mazda. So been all sorts of integration, and that integration has slowly died down over the years as Ford sold more and more of Mazda off. One of the last joint ventures it had was the replacement of the 121, which was basically a BE91 Fiesta in Europe latterly, and it replaced it in 2002 with the Demio, or Mazda 2, as it was known internationally. And the DY platform car was quite a tall, narrow, boxy car, which you'd expect to find in Japan. But then it became a much more sort of standardized hatchback with the DE generation, which this is. And that appeared in 2007 along with the 6th generation Ford Fiesta, which is basically the same car underneath. The Fiesta itself was intended to be a world car. It did not hit all world markets because of the banking crisis. Ford had slashed the majority of its supply chains as well in that process, and that delayed its North American debut to 2010, despite the fact that the Verve concept, there was a European and a US version, and well, 2 US versions actually, all appeared within months of each other in 2007. Because of that, the Mazda 2 was delayed as well, and this car initially appeared in 2007, but it wasn't until 2010 when the facelifted 2 appeared that it came to the United States. And this is the facelifted car. You can't really tell much, but all this lower panel was new at the time. There was a 3 and 5 door hatchback variant of the DE and a sedan, and it's only the 5-door hatchback that actually came to the United States. The later DJ model, which gave Mazda its current look, Scion, as was, sold a version of it as the IA sedan, and then when Scion disappeared, it was replaced with the Toyota Yaris IA, which was a sedan, and the Yaris hatchback, which was also a Mazda 2. But the 2 from US shores was gone forever. So consequently, you don't see that many. Only 63,000 or so were sold in the US up to 2014. A few 2015 models were sold, about 100, but only about 137, which would make that a curious rarity. So here we are. We've got this 2014 example that I've borrowed from Danny and Brian at Stadium GM, so I want to thank them for their time today. I'm Darren Walker, and this is Auto Atlantica. Now overseas, the Mazda 2 had a raft of different engines, including a turbo diesel, but over here it just had the one single 1.5 litre ZY engine. That's a variable valve timing unit with dual overhead cams, and for the US market produces around 100 horsepower, thereabouts. The car was offered here with both the 5-speed manual and a 4-speed automatic transmission, and it's the latter transmission which is in this particular car. It's a 2014, so one of the last that was built. 2014 was pretty much the final model year. There were some 2015s that were built, only about 137 or so. Now, as I've said, only the 5-door was actually sold here. The sedan wasn't, which was a peculiar choice really, given that it was offered elsewhere, and Americans often like small sedans. But indeed, the Fiesta was sold as a sedan as well. But as far as the hatchback was concerned, only the 5-door was ever offered over here, like this car. And that's because Americans just prefer that kind of practicality in general, unless it's something specialist like the Mini. Now, there were two trim levels of the Mazda 2 that were available here. The basic one, which was called the Sport, which this one is, and for that you get such niceties as steel wheels. You don't get a sunroof. You get this rather hard plastic stuff on the dashboard. You get a CD player. As I've said, it comes with a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed auto, this one being the auto, obviously. You do get air conditioning, you get electric windows, and you get electric heated mirrors as well. And that's pretty much about it. You get a rev counter, but there's no sort of self-dimming mirrors or anything like that. Once you go up to the next trim level, which was the all singing, all dancing touring, then you got such niceties as alloy wheels and a leather trimmed steering wheel, and also you got a natty rear spoiler on the back of it as well. But really, there's not a great deal of difference between the two. They both had exactly the same engine, and it is essentially basic transport. I do like these natty seats. This kind of funky avant-garde seat covering with these really nice brazen patterns on here. This was quite common in European cars sort of 10-20 years ago, but not so common here, so it's quite refreshing to see this sort of funky seat pattern. The stereo is very basic. Like I say, it's just a CD player with a radio. There's no satellite navigation, there's no satellite radio. You do have a USB port down here and an auxiliary port as well, so you can plug your own tunes in. And the climate control is very basic. It's all manual, but it works very, very well. And these controls are very functional. They're very ergonomic, and yeah, not had a problem. I like it. You know, as a basic commuter car or even a small family car, you can't go wrong. Now, from what I've sampled of this car so far, you can very, very much tell its Fiesta roots. It is a beautifully compliant car in terms of its driving dynamics. It's got terrific handling and ride qualities combined, and that was what made the Fiesta so great. The power steering in this car is just beautifully weighted. That's the Japanese influence for you. And the transmission feels really punchy considering it's only got 100 horsepower. It's got a nice amount of torque to it. It's also very quiet. Sound editing is excellent. The brakes I'm going to pass judgment on because obviously this is a used car with 95,000 miles on it. These brake rotors, discs do need replacing. They're not very good. Just before I arrived, we had an almighty thunderstorm and the car was wet through. That has now sort of transpired in this sunshine to little dots of dirt all over the car. So I apologise for that. They did get it ready for me before I got here, but I went through that thunderstorm on the way. You know, we're at about 50 miles an hour on this sort of back road here, and yeah, the car drives fine. These seats, I do like these seats. These wings really hold you in quite nicely, and the ride is great too. The suspension is firm. I don't think it would take that much to get into trouble if you started going on some seriously rough roads, but that's not what it's meant for. The dashboard itself is very compact. I mean, this cowling is tiny. I mean, it's almost as tiny as a Fiat 500, and you've got 3 gauges essentially in here. And you know, by 2025 standards, it's as basic as they come. But you know, it's got some nice design details in here. I like the round vents, for instance. They're a kind of a nice sort of throwback look, and it's got very good visibility as well. That rear window is huge, and it's got a huge rear wiper as well to actually clean it with. These wipers, you've got one very large wiper in front of the driver. That's probably a good 28 inches or so, maybe 26, but again, very much like the Fiesta setup. So here on the open road, it's cruising really nicely, you know, in probably top gear now, and it's, yeah, there's nothing that's offensive about it at all. I think it definitely helps having that punchier 1.5 with a larger amount of torque. You don't get to see many Mazda 2s here. You never did, even when they were new. Like I say, they only sold just over 60,000 of them. By 2014, which was the 3rd model year, they sold 12,000, and in the 2015 model year, just 137. You know what I'm like, if it was the 2015, I'd probably have bought this just for that curious statistic alone. And everything works on this car beautifully. This would be a great commuting car for somebody. Had I have not bought my Mini, I would have likely have bought this. And for my channel, you know, it's just nice to be in something different other than an SUV of some description. One of the types of car that I'm really drawn to are just ordinary basic cars. You know, cars which were largely thrown away and therefore have become pretty rare. This one's actually in really nice condition. It's got a couple of war wounds that are on the passenger side of the car. There's no signs of rust, nothing on this thing. You know, this car does have, obviously, all the modern conveniences. It's got ABS, for instance. It's got traction control. It's got the driver stability control as well, which I think is the traction control. And it's got all those modern sort of technical marvels which, you know, help to keep you safe. But I do like its basic nature. If it was a manual, this would be a hoot. But, you know, this very basic sort of radio and CD and ventilation system setup as well is super. Oh, there are those brakes. Yeah, those rotors definitely need doing. It's very smooth. The transmission is silky smooth. It almost feels like a CVT, but it's not. This is a 4-speed auto. So the question remains, as always, would I buy it? Well, if I was in the market for a commuter car now, yes, I would. This would tick all the boxes for me. The fact that it's a 5-door and not a 3-door makes no difference at all. In fact, I wish my Mini was a 5-door in many respects. That would definitely help with all the crap that I put in it in the morning and take out of it in the evening. You know, it feels very new. There's no sort of unwarranted squeaks or rattles or anything like that. It is very well screwed together, this thing. And you know, with the kind of mileage that I do for work, which is roughly around 5,000 miles a year, 6,000 tops, this would be absolutely perfect. You could get years out of this thing. So it's yeah, this will make somebody a really good car, really good deal. And you know, that engine as well, I mean, it's just not stressed at all, especially with this gearbox. You know, you'll easily get 35 miles per gallon average out of it, and if you're really careful, you could probably average the best part of 40, which by US standards is excellent. Once these brakes are fixed, it would be a beautiful car. Doesn't really matter that it's got no toys to play with, it's just less to go wrong. And if you're using the car just to commute with, what you want is reliability. You want something that you can depend on. You know, your job relies on it. And I think this is one of those cars. And it is fun to drive. You know, it's got that excellent platform from the Fiesta underneath, so you can really have fun with it and throw it around. So there we are. Those are my impressions of the DE second generation Mazda 2. A delightful little car, really. And, you know, considering that this is knocking on the door of 100,000 miles, it still feels surprisingly new. It feels very tight. There's no squeaks or rattles that are unwarranted in any way, shape or form. And it drives beautifully. This is a perfect commuter car for somebody, or a first car for a high school student. You know, these are reliable, they're fun to drive, they're economical as well. And I certainly would be seen quite happily in one, just using it to commute with. It's perfect for that particular role. And this probably would have been a wiser choice than my Mini, considering how much Minis are to repair. But even so, it just came at the wrong time. So yeah, so that's it. There's not much more really to say about it. These are pretty much as basic as they get these days, and that in itself is something that I really like, as people that know me are aware of. So a future festival of the unexceptional candidate, perhaps? Certainly. What about Radwood? Definitely. You know, if you dress this up with some nice alloy wheels on it, it would look great at Radwood. So, yeah, there we are. It's a nice car, and I'm really glad that I got to drive it. I'm Darren Walker, and this is Auto Atlantica.